Have you ever realized your family only remembers you exist when they need something? That's how my sister's wedding day started. And by the end of that night, the same people who had spent years pushing my children aside would discover they had just humiliated the wrong child. My phone rang at 6:03 that morning. My mother. "The florist quit," she said. "Get to the venue early. There are decorations that still need to be finished." No hello, no good morning, no please, just another job. My younger sister Natalie was getting married that afternoon. Natalie had always been the favorite. When she got into trouble, my parents fixed it. When I struggled, they told me to work harder. That was our family. An hour later, I arrived at the venue with my 2 children. Ryan was 14, Ava was 12. As we approached the entrance, a staff member checked his tablet. Then his smile disappeared. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your names aren't listed for the family entrance." I frowned. "We're family." The employee shifted uncomfortably. "Your access is through the service entrance." The service entrance, not the family entrance, for the bride's own sister. Ryan glanced toward the front doors where guests were arriving. "Same as always," he muttered. Ava stared at the ground. Neither of them looked surprised. That hurt more than anything. They'd seen this before. Inside, my mother pointed at several unopened boxes. "There you are. Those centerpieces need to be finished." No greeting. No thank you, just work. For the next 2 hours, my children arranged flowers while relatives arrived through the front entrance. Then I watched my brother walk in carrying nothing. A server handed him a glass of champagne before he even sat down. A few minutes later, he disappeared into a private hospitality suite. Meanwhile, Ava was opening flower boxes. Ryan was carrying heavy vases. Around 11, Natalie finally appeared, the bride. She looked at us and frowned. "Why are you still here?" "Your mother asked us to help." "Well, you're done now," she said coldly. "Try to stay out of the way. I don't want people wandering into photos." Not guests, not family, just people in the way. Ava lowered her eyes. Ryan clenched his jaw, and for the first time that day, I stopped telling myself this was accidental. Someone wanted my children to know exactly where they ranked in this family. What I didn't know was how far they were willing to take it. Because a few hours later, someone would put their hands on my daughter, and the entire wedding would stop. For the next hour, I kept telling myself things would improve once the ceremony started. I was wrong. By noon, guests were arriving in waves. Luxury cars filled the parking area, and every person walking toward the ceremony lawn reminded me exactly where my family thought we belonged. The ceremony began shortly afterward. An usher led Ryan, Ava, and me to our seats. I expected the back row. What I didn't expect was being seated behind almost everyone. Family members filled the front rows. Friends sat behind them. Coworkers came next. Then distant relatives. Then us. Ava glanced around. "Are we late?" "No." "Then why are we sitting back here?" I forced a smile. I couldn't bring myself to answer because we both already knew. The ceremony passed in a blur. Natalie cried. Guests applauded. My parents smiled proudly from the front row. An hour later, guests drifted from the ceremony lawn toward the reception area set up across the estate grounds. Rows of decorated reception tables stretched beneath hundreds of string lights. Music played softly across the lawn. Servers moved between tables carrying silver trays. Our table was waiting beside the catering station, not near the family, not near the bridal party, beside the service area. Every few minutes, catering staff pushed carts past our table carrying food and drinks. Ryan looked around. "They did this on purpose." I didn't answer, because he was right. A few minutes later, a woman from another table approached us. She smiled politely. "Excuse me, could you tell me where the restrooms are?" For a second, I didn't understand. Then I realized what she thought. She thought we worked there. Before I could answer, she noticed the place cards on our table. Her face turned bright red. "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry." She hurried away. Ryan looked down. Ava stared at the tablecloth. Neither of them said anything. Dinner service began. Every nearby table received food first. We waited and waited. By the time our meals arrived, guests at surrounding tables were already asking for dessert menus. Even the server looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry about the delay." "It's okay," I said, but it wasn't. A few minutes later, my mother appeared beside our table holding a champagne glass. For one brief moment, I thought she had come to apologize. Instead, she said, "The photographer is gathering all the nieces and nephews for a family picture." Ava immediately smiled. Ryan sat up straighter. Then my mother added 4 words, "Not your 2 children." The smile disappeared from Ava's face. I stared at her. "What do you mean? The bride only wants certain children in the pictures. They're family." My mother's expression never changed. "Today is about Natalie." Then she walked away, just like that, as if excluding 2 children from a family photograph was completely reasonable. Ryan stared at his plate. His jaw tightened. Across the lawn, cousins gathered near the floral arch for pictures. Ava watched them quietly. And that's when I saw something that scared me. Not sadness, not embarrassment. Acceptance. As if she had already decided this was simply where she belonged. Less than 30 minutes later, Ava quietly stood up from the table. "I need to use the restroom." I nodded. The nearest one was upstairs. Nothing unusual, nothing complicated. Just a 12-year-old girl trying to use a bathroom. Ryan watched her walk away. I watched too. Maybe because something already felt wrong. Maybe because after the way the day had gone, I no longer trusted anything around my family. Ava had almost reached the grand staircase when my mother stepped directly into her path. "Not those stairs." Ava stopped, confused. "I just need the restroom. Use the service stairs." The words hit me immediately. Not again. Not another reminder of where they thought my children belonged. I pushed back my chair and stood. "Mom, she's just going upstairs." My mother's expression hardened. "The main staircase is for guests." For a second, nobody spoke. Then I said the obvious. "She is a guest." My mother looked at Ava, then she shook her head. "No, she's your daughter." As though those were 2 completely different things. Around us, nearby conversations began to fade. People were listening now. Watching, Ava glanced toward me, then toward the service hallway. And something inside me broke because she wasn't arguing. She wasn't upset. She was preparing to obey. As if being pushed aside had become normal. As if she expected it. Slowly, she turned toward the service corridor. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because my mother wasn't finished. As Ava walked away, my mother reached out and grabbed her shoulder. Hard. Then shoved her toward the service hallway. The force wasn't enough to knock her down. But it was enough. Ava stumbled sideways and caught herself against the wall. The entire reception area went silent. Every nearby conversation stopped. Every nearby head turned. Ryan shot out of his chair so fast it crashed backward onto the ground. For 1 second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Then Ryan looked directly at our grandmother. For the first time all day, he looked completely calm. And smiled. Not an angry smile. Not a nervous smile. A knowing smile. The kind of smile someone gives when they realize another person has just made a very expensive mistake. And the next words out of his mouth would change the entire wedding. For 1 second, nobody moved. The entire reception area was silent. My mother stood frozen beside Ava. Ryan looked directly at her. "That's funny," he said. His voice carried across the lawn. "Because the girl you just shoved owns this place." A ripple moved through the crowd. People turned. Conversations stopped. My mother's face went white. "What did you just say?" Ryan didn't look away. "I said Ava owns the estate." My father immediately pushed through the crowd. "That's ridiculous." His voice was loud now. "A child can't own a property like this." Ryan calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Not nervous, not emotional, prepared, like he'd known this moment was coming. A few taps later, he turned the screen around. "Then explain this." My mother snatched the phone. My father leaned over her shoulder. Both of them stared. Neither spoke. "It's true," I said. 3 years earlier, Ava's grandmother had left her the estate through a trust. Everything had been handled legally. Everything had been documented. Everything had been public record. Natalie laughed nervously. The sound didn't even convince her. "No," she shook her head. "No, that's impossible." Then she looked around the reception area, at the string lights overhead. The reception tables spread across the lawn, the gardens surrounding the estate, the lake beyond the grounds, the venue she'd spent months bragging about. Slowly, her expression changed. "You're saying," she swallowed, My wedding is happening at a venue owned by my niece. Yes, but nobody told me. That one almost made me laugh. I tried, more than once. You told me to stop bothering you. The crowd grew quieter. So did Mom. I looked directly at my parents. You ignored every conversation that wasn't about yourselves. Several guests exchanged looks. One woman actually covered her mouth. Another shook her head. The embarrassment on my mother's face was becoming impossible to hide. Right then, the estate manager arrived, drawn by the crowd. My mother immediately pointed at Ava. This child does not own this property. The manager looked confused, then smiled politely. Actually, she does. The whispers exploded across the reception lawn. Natalie's new husband stared at Ava. My father looked physically sick. And my mother finally ran out of arguments. Because the granddaughter she had treated like a servant owned everything around her. But ownership wasn't what hurt them most. Then Ava finally spoke. And what she said hurt them far more than the estate ever could. The entire reception area was silent. Everyone was looking at Ava, my 12-year-old daughter, the same girl who had been sent through the service entrance, seated beside the catering station, excluded from family photographs, and shoved for trying to walk up a staircase. My mother finally found her voice. Ava, sweetheart. No, the word wasn't loud, but it stopped her instantly. Ava looked directly at her grandmother. You knew I was your granddaughter before you knew I owned anything. My mother's face crumpled. Ava, I didn't know. That's the problem. Ava shook her head. You shouldn't have needed to know. The silence that followed felt heavier than the reveal, because everyone standing there understood exactly what she meant. This had never been about the estate, or the venue, or the money. It was about how they treated people when they believed those people had nothing to offer. For the first time all day, my mother looked afraid, not embarrassed, not angry, afraid, as if she finally understood what she had just lost. Natalie suddenly stepped forward. Ava, wait, her voice cracked. We didn't know, Ryan laughed once. A short, humorless laugh. You didn't know her, nobody answered, because they couldn't. My father finally found his voice. The confident man who had spent the entire day ordering people around suddenly looked 20 years older. We made a mistake. Ava looked at him quietly, then nodded. I know. 3 simple words, no anger, no shouting, no revenge. And somehow that hurt them more. My mother reached toward her. Please don't leave like this. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ava took my hand. Ryan stepped beside us. Together, we turned toward the estate's main entrance. Nobody tried to stop us again, because there was nothing left to say. Guests moved aside as we walked past. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked ashamed. Behind us, the reception continued, but nobody was paying attention to the music. Nobody was watching the dance floor. Nobody was talking about the decorations. They were watching the family that had spent years treating a little girl like she didn't belong. And the little girl who chose to walk away anyway. The estate belonged to Ava, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she finally knew her worth, and for the first time, so did everyone else. The family finally understood what they had lost. Unfortunately for them, they understood it too late. Please subscribe to our channel, and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.